It's October 25th, 1944. 6:47 a.m., Philippine Sea. Ensign William C. Brooks is on radar watch aboard the USS Johnston when his screen lights up with contacts. Lots of contacts. He counts them twice. Then he calls Commander Ernest E. Evans to the bridge. Evans looks at the radar plot. 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers. The entire Japanese center force, the most powerful surface fleet Japan has left, is steaming directly toward Taffy 3 at 30 knots. They're 20 miles out and closing fast. Evans commands a Fletcher-class destroyer. The Johnston displaces 2,200 tons, carries 5 5-inch guns and 10 torpedo tubes. Behind him are 6 escort carriers, glorified cargo ships with flight decks welded on top, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. Taffy 3's job is to provide air support for the invasion of Leyte. They're not supposed to fight battleships. Nobody thought they'd have to. The Japanese flagship bearing down on them is the Yamato. She displaces 72,000 tons. Her main guns fire 18.1-inch shells. Each shell weighs 3,200 pounds. One shell is heavier than Johnston's entire 5-gun broadside. Yamato's armor belt is 16 inches thick. Johnston's 5-inch guns can't penetrate that. Not at any range. The math doesn't work. Admiral Clifton Sprague commands Taffy 3 from the carrier Fanshawe Bay. His carriers top out at 17 knots. The Japanese fleet can do 30. His carriers have no armor. One hit from Yamato's main battery will gut a carrier stem to stern. Sprague knows this. Everyone knows this. The Japanese should have been somewhere else. Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet was supposed to be covering the northern approach. But Halsey took the bait. He's chasing Japanese carriers 300 miles north. Those carriers are decoys. They have no aircraft. Halsey doesn't know that yet. What he's left behind is Taffy 3. 6 baby carriers, 7 tin cans, and absolutely nothing between them and 4 battleships. At 6:58 a.m., Yamato's forward turrets open fire. The shells arc through the morning sky. Sprague can see them coming. They look like cars flying through the air. The first salvo lands 100 yards short of Fanshawe Bay. Pink and purple geysers erupt from the ocean. The Japanese are using dye markers in their shells to spot their fall of shot. Red dye for Yamato, pink for Nagato, yellow for Congo, green for Haruna. It's almost beautiful if it wasn't designed to kill you. Sprague orders the carriers to run. Due east into the wind, launching every aircraft they've got. He orders the destroyers to lay smoke. And then he does something that shouldn't work, something that violates every principle of naval warfare. He orders his destroyers to attack. 3 destroyers, against 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. It's not a fight, it's math. And the math says Taffy 3 should be wiped off the ocean in 20 minutes. Commander Evans doesn't wait for the order to reach Johnston specifically. He's already turning into the attack. His executive officer asks if they should wait for the other destroyers. Evans says no. Johnston's going in alone. Evans is Cherokee, from Pawnee, Oklahoma. The Navy tried to wash him out of Annapolis twice for deficient conduct. He made it through anyway. When he took command of Johnston 2 years ago, he told the crew, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." Nobody got off. Now Johnston is accelerating to flank speed, 35 knots, heading directly at the Japanese center force. 1 destroyer. 1. Hey, real quick, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. What city? What state? What country? And what time is it for you right now? Always awesome to see how far this reaches. All right, back to the fight. Let's talk about what Johnston is charging into. The Yamato displaces 72,000 tons. Johnston displaces 2,100 tons. Yamato outweighs Johnston 34-1. Yamato's main battery, 9 18.1-inch guns, can fire a broadside of 28,800 pounds of steel. Johnston's entire broadside, all 5 guns firing, throws 275 pounds of steel. Yamato fires 104 times more metal per salvo. Yamato's main belt armor is 16 inches of hardened steel. Johnston's 5-inch guns fire a 55-pound shell. At maximum range, that shell can penetrate maybe 3 inches of armor. Maybe. Against Yamato's belt, Johnston's guns are throwing softballs at a tank. But Yamato isn't the only problem. Nagato. 39,000 tons, 8 16-inch guns. Kongo and Haruna, 36,000 tons each, 8 14-inch guns apiece. Then there are the heavy cruisers, Haguro, Tone, Chikuma, Chokai. Each one mounts 10 8-inch guns and displaces more than 13,000 tons. Any one of these cruisers outguns Johnston. The Japanese have 8 of them. Johnston's Mark 15 torpedoes have a maximum range of 10,500 yards with a 600-pound warhead. That's just under 6 miles. To get a shot, Johnston has to close to torpedo range, under fire. From ships that can hit her at 20 miles, Johnston has to cover 14 miles while the entire Japanese center force shoots at her. And they're already shooting. At 7:10 a.m., Johnston enters the kill zone. Japanese heavy cruisers open fire. 8-inch shells bracket the ship, some long, some short. Johnston is zigzagging at 35 knots, making radical turns every 30 seconds. The Japanese are using radar-directed fire control. They're good. A near miss explodes 20 feet off Johnston's port beam. Shrapnel tears through the hull. 3 men go down. Commander Evans stands on the bridge, jaw clenched, watching the shell fire walk toward his ship. His gunnery officer, Lieutenant Robert Hagen, is feeding firing solutions to the 5-inch mounts. Johnston's guns are firing back, but it's like punching a brick wall. The shells just bounce off. The crew knows the odds. Torpedoman's mate Ballard, loading tubes amidships, can see the pagoda masts of the Japanese battleships through the smoke. They look like skyscrapers. The Japanese ships are so big he can see their gun turrets rotating. When Yamato fires her main battery, the muzzle blast is visible from 15 miles away. An orange fireball the size of a house. This is what naval warfare looks like when the math is wrong. When one side has all the armor, all the guns, all the weight, and the other side has speed and desperation. Johnston has one advantage. American torpedoes work now. For the first 2 years of the war, American torpedoes were junk. Faulty magnetic detonators, depth-keeping failures, duds. Submariners fired torpedoes at point-blank range and watched them bounce off Japanese hulls without exploding. But by October 1944, the Mark 15 torpedo works. When it hits, it explodes. That's Johnston's edge. 10 torpedoes, if they can get close enough to launch them. At 7:15 a.m., a Japanese 14-inch shell from Congo screams over Johnston's mast. The shell doesn't hit. It doesn't have to. The pressure wave from a shell that size passing overhead can rupture a man's lungs. Johnston's crew hit the deck. Evans doesn't flinch. He's steering the ship manually now, calling rudder commands directly to the helm. Left full rudder. Steady as she goes. Right full rudder. He's dodging shellfire by feel, reading the splashes, anticipating where the next salvo will land. He's been doing this for 8 minutes. The Japanese have fired over 200 shells at Johnston. None have hit. Yet. At 7:16 a.m., Johnston closes to 10,000 yards. Torpedo range. Evans gives the order. All 10 tubes fire in a single rippling salvo. 10 torpedoes, tracking through the water at 45 knots, spread across a 1,000-yard fan. Now Johnston has to survive long enough to see if they hit anything. At 7:24 a.m., one of Johnston's torpedoes slams into the heavy cruiser Kumano. The explosion tears off Kumano's bow. Everything forward of the bridge. Gone. 100 feet of warship, including the forward turrets, just vanishes in a fireball. Kumano slews hard to port, out of control, trailing oil and smoke. She's out of the fight. One of Japan's heavy cruisers, crippled by a single torpedo from a ship she outweighs 6-1. But Johnston doesn't see it. They're too busy dying. At 7:25 a.m., three 14-inch shells from Congo hit Johnston almost simultaneously. The first shell penetrates the aft deckhouse and explodes inside. The blast vaporizes the aftercrew quarters. 12 men dead instantly. The second shell tears through the aft stack, destroying Johnston's fire control radar. The third shell penetrates the engine room. The engine room hit is catastrophic. The shell doesn't explode. It's a dud. But a 14-inch armor-piercing shell doesn't need to explode to kill you. It weighs 1,400 pounds, and it's traveling at 2,400 feet per second. It punches through Johnston's hull, ricochets off the reduction gear, smashes through steam lines, and exits through the port side. Superheated steam at 600 degrees fills the compartment. Chief Machinist's mate George Moore is in the engine room when it happens. The steam flash boils the air. Moore can't see, can't breathe. He grabs the emergency shutdown valves by memory, shuts down the turbines to prevent a catastrophic explosion, then feels his way to the ladder. His hands are burned to the bone. He climbs anyway. Of the 23 men in the engine room, 5 die instantly from the steam. Moore saves the rest. Johnston loses power to the aft engine. Speed drops from 35 knots to 17 knots. That's slower than the Japanese battleships. Johnston can't run anymore. She can only fight. Commander Evans is on the bridge when the shells hit. The blast throws him against the bulkhead. Shrapnel tears into his left hand. 2 fingers are just gone, hanging by tendons. More shrapnel rips through his neck and chest. Blood soaks through his shirt. Evans wraps his hand in a rag, doesn't even look at it, and keeps giving orders. Johnston's crew doesn't panic. They've trained for this. Damage control parties seal the breaches. Firefighters douse the flames. Electricians reroute power around destroyed circuits. In 6 minutes, Johnston has her remaining guns back online. One engine is dead, but the other is running. She's still in the fight. At 7:30 a.m., the other destroyers arrive. USS Howell and USS Heermann charge through the smokescreen, launching their own torpedo attacks. The 3 destroyers, Johnston, Howell, Heermann, spread out and hit the Japanese from 3 different angles. Now the Japanese have to maneuver. Battleships don't turn fast. Yamato begins a wide turn to avoid torpedoes. So does Nagato. The heavy cruisers scatter. This is the moment everything changes. The Japanese have overwhelming firepower. They should be shooting the carriers. Instead, they're dodging torpedoes from 3 destroyers that won't die. Admiral Kurita, commanding from Yamato, loses track of the tactical situation. His formation breaks apart. Ships maneuver independently. The organized firing solution against Taffy 3's carriers falls apart. Lieutenant Commander Robert W. Copeland, commanding the destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts, watches Johnston's attack through binoculars. Roberts is even smaller than Johnston, 1,400 tons, 3 5-inch guns. Copeland knows what he's supposed to do. Destroyer escorts screen carriers. They don't attack battleships. But he's watching Johnston burn from stem to stern, still firing, still charging, and he makes a decision. Samuel B. Roberts turns into the attack. So does USS Raymond and USS Dennis. Now it's not 3 destroyers. It's 6 ships, 3 destroyers and 3 destroyer escorts, all charging into the Japanese center force. The entire philosophy of destroyer tactics says this shouldn't work. You don't charge battleships. You launch torpedoes from maximum range and run. You don't close to gun range. You definitely don't keep fighting after you're hit. Johnston does all of it. At 7:35 a.m., Johnston's forward 5-inch guns engage the heavy cruiser Tone at 6,000 yards. Tone's 8-inch shells are tearing up the ocean around Johnston. Hagen's gun crews are firing as fast as they can reload, 18 rounds per minute per gun. They're hitting Tone's superstructure, killing her fire control, wrecking her radar. They can't sink her, but they can make her bleed. And the Japanese are bleeding. By 8 a.m., Johnston has taken over 40 hits. Her aft engine is dead. Her bridge is wrecked. Her fire control radar is gone. She's steering by manual control from a makeshift station in the aft deckhouse. Commander Evans is still giving orders, blood-soaked, missing fingers, refusing evacuation. Johnston's forward guns are still firing, manually aimed now, no radar, no fire control computer. Gun crews are sighting through iron sights like it's 1918. They're hitting cruiser Chikuma at 7,000 yards. Chikuma turns away, her superstructure on fire. At 8:20 a.m., Japanese destroyers close in for the kill. They're faster than Johnston, undamaged, and they smell blood. 4 destroyers, Asagumo, Fujinami, Yamagumo, and Kishinami, form a firing line at 5,000 yards and start pumping 5-inch shells into Johnston's hull. This is the execution. Johnston is fighting destroyers now, ships her own size, and she's torn to pieces. Shell hits the forward gun mount. The mount jams. Crew clears it manually, gets the gun firing again in 3 minutes. Shell hits the radio room. All communications go dead. Shell penetrates the forward magazine. The damage control party floods the magazine to prevent a catastrophic explosion. Johnston is listing 7 degrees to port, her deck awash, and she's still shooting. At 8:45 a.m., Johnston's last operational gun mount takes a direct hit. The gun barrel is bent. The breech is jammed. Gun Captain Bill Mercer looks at it, looks at his crew, and says they're done. There's nothing left to shoot with. Evans orders abandon ship. Johnston is dead in the water, her deck nearly vertical, fires burning throughout the hull. The crew begins going over the side. There aren't enough life rafts. Many men just jump and start swimming. The water is thick with oil. Men are covered in it, choking on it. Evans is last seen on the bridge, still standing, watching his crew get off. Nobody sees him after that. He goes down with Johnston. At 9:10 a.m., Johnston rolls onto her port side and sinks. Her bow lifts out of the water. For a moment, the entire forward section is visible, wrecked, burning, shot full of holes. Then she slides under. 186 men go down with her. 141 survivors are in the water. And then something happens that no one expects. A Japanese destroyer, Yukikaze, steams past the survivors. Officers line the rail. They come to attention. They salute. A formal naval salute, not ironic, not mocking. Respect. Yukikaze's captain sees what Johnston did, saw one destroyer charge his entire fleet, and he salutes. Other Japanese ships do the same as they steam past. Enemy sailors saluting enemy sailors. Lieutenant Commander Robert Hagan, Johnston's gunnery officer, is in the water watching this. He'll remember it for the rest of his life. He'll tell people about it, and they won't believe him. But it happened. The Japanese saluted. By 9:30 a.m., the Battle off Samar is over. Admiral Kurita, still aboard Yamato, orders a retreat. He's taken casualties, lost formation cohesion, and he thinks he's fighting fleet carriers, not escort carriers. He doesn't know Taffy 3 is 6 baby flat tops and 7 tin cans. He thinks he's up against Halsey's 3rd Fleet. He turns around and runs. 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers, retreating from 6 escort carriers and 7 destroyers. Johnston bought that. Johnston and Howell and Samuel B. Roberts, 3 ships that charged when they should have died. They disrupted the attack, broke up the formation, made the Japanese blink. Taffy 3 survives. The invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf survives, because Johnston wouldn't quit. 141 survivors float in the ocean for 2 days before rescue. Some don't make it. Sharks, exposure, thirst. But 141 make it home. Commander Ernest E. Evans does not. Commander Ernest E. Evans receives the Medal of Honor posthumously. The citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." It doesn't capture it. No citation could. Evans charged 4 battleships in a destroyer and bought enough time for the invasion fleet to survive. That's what happened. That's the math. The numbers from October 25, 1944. USS Johnston sunk, 186 dead. USS Howell sunk, 253 dead. USS Samuel B. Roberts sunk, 89 dead. USS Gambier Bay, one of Taffy III's escort carriers, sunk by Japanese gunfire, 147 dead. Total American casualties, 675 men. Japanese casualties, heavy cruiser Kumano crippled, heavy cruiser Chikuma heavily damaged, heavy cruiser Chokai scuttled after air attack, heavy cruiser Suzuya sunk. 3 destroyers damaged, and Admiral Kurita's center force retreating in confusion, the invasion fleet at Leyte Gulf intact. The strategic situation is this. MacArthur's invasion of the Philippines depends on the ships at Leyte Gulf. If the Japanese sink the transports, the invasion fails. 200,000 American soldiers are ashore with no resupply, no reinforcement, no way home. Kurita's battleships could have steamed into Leyte Gulf unopposed and shot the transports to pieces. Johnston stopped that from happening. Not alone, Howell, Heermann, Samuel B. Roberts, the other destroyer escorts, the pilots from Taffy III's carriers flying ammunition dry planes just to make strafing runs, they all stopped it. But Johnston led the charge. After the war, naval historians study the battle off Samar trying to understand what happened. How did 7 destroyers turn back the most powerful surface fleet Japan had left? The answer is simple, and it's not simple. Taffy III fought like the Japanese weren't supposed to win. Every tactical manual says destroyers don't charge battleships. Taffy III didn't read the manual. They charged anyway. This changes destroyer doctrine. Before Samar, destroyers are considered screening vessels. They protect the big ships. After Samar, destroyers are considered offensive weapons. Fast, maneuverable, capable of independent action against superior forces. The U.S. Navy starts training destroyer captains differently. Aggression becomes doctrine. When you're outgunned, you attack. You don't wait for orders. You don't calculate the odds. You see the threat and you go in. Johnston proves it works. The Japanese salute becomes legend. Navy historians verify it through Japanese records and survivor testimony. It happened. Yukikaze's crew lined the rails and saluted Johnston's survivors. In warrior cultures, American, Japanese, any culture that values combat, there's a recognition that transcends nationalism. Johnston fought the way any warrior would want to fight. Outnumbered, outgunned, no chance of survival, and they charged anyway. The Japanese recognized that. They saluted it. Today, at the U.S. Naval Academy, midshipmen study the battle off Samar. They learn about Johnston's charge in their tactics classes. The lesson isn't about suicide missions or pointless heroism. The lesson is about what happens when you refuse to accept the math. The Japanese had the firepower. They had the armor. They had every advantage. They lost anyway because Taffy III fought like the outcome wasn't predetermined. In 2019, research vessel Petrel finds Johnston's wreck in 20,000 feet of water off Samar. Her hull is remarkably intact, considering she was shot to pieces. Her forward guns are still trained out, still aimed at the enemy. Even on the bottom of the Philippine Sea, Johnston looks like she's ready to fight. That's the legacy. Commander Evans told his crew, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way." He meant it. On October 25, 1944, Johnston went into harm's way against 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. She fought until she had nothing left to fight with, and when she went down, the enemy saluted. That's not propaganda. That's not myth. That's what happened. 1 destroyer, 327 men, against the Imperial Japanese Navy's entire center force. The math said Johnston should die in 20 minutes. Johnston fought for 2.5 hours and took a fleet with her. That's the story. That's why it matters.